Rhythm and blues gave us some of the greatest voices in music history. But behind a lot of those voices was something people talk about far less: the band. The musicians who built the groove, wrote the hooks, and turned a singer into a legend. Today, we're counting down the 15 greatest R&B bands of all time, along with the song that defines each one, the acts who were the sound, not just the backing track. No solo singers, no vocal groups standing on a riser. Just the bands who plugged in, turned it up, and changed the genre forever. Let's get into it. Number 15, The Whispers. And the Beat Goes On, 1979. The Whispers started as teenagers on the street corners of the Watts neighborhood in Los Angeles, singing together as the Eden Trio, before twin brothers Wallace and Walter Scott joined Nicholas Caldwell, Marcus Hudson, and Gordy Harmon in 1963. They spent years grinding through small labels and Bay Area nightclubs before their first real breakthrough, Seems Like I Gotta Do Wrong, cracked the R&B Top 10 in 1970 and kept reinventing themselves from there, moving from steady soul act to funk-era hitmakers to the smoother sound of 1987's Rocksteady. There'll always be something new. Their signature moment came in 1979 with And the Beat Goes On, a #1 R&B hit and one of the most enduring dance floor records of the era, later sampled by Will Smith. The beat goes on. Groups with one great era are common. Groups that can point to distinct hit-making periods across 3 separate decades are rare, and that consistency is exactly why the Whispers open this list instead of getting left off it. Number 14, Cameo, Word Up, 1986. Cameo's story starts with Larry Blackmon, a Harlem-raised drummer who started his first group, the New York City Players, in 1974, a direct homage to the Ohio Players that caused enough confusion to force a name change. The early band was massive by design, 13 or 14 members deep with horns and percussion, playing raw funk on records like 1977's Rigor Mortis. Through the early 80s, Blackmon stripped the lineup down and rebuilt Cameo's sound around synthesizers, minimalism, and his own theatrical stage persona, producing Word Up in 1986, one of the most recognizable grooves of the decade. Cameo is proof that a band can completely reinvent its sound more than once and still come out the other side with an identity nobody else has. Number 13, The Bar-Kays' Soulfinger, 1967. The Bar-Kays formed in Memphis in 1966, and by 1967 they'd scored an instrumental hit with Soulfinger and become Otis Redding's touring band, poised to become Stax's next breakout stars. On December 10, 1967, the plane carrying Redding and the Bar-Kays crashed into Lake Monona, Wisconsin. 4 band members died alongside Redding, leaving trumpeter Ben Cauley as the sole survivor of that flight and bassist James Alexander, who'd traveled separately to help rebuild. Alexander and Cauley spent months reassembling the group from nothing, continuing as Stax's house band before reinventing themselves again as a full-on funk outfit through the 1970s and beyond. The Bar-Kays are proof that a band can survive its own worst day and still have decades of music left in it. That's not a metaphor here. It's literally what happened. Number 12. The S.O.S. Band, Take Your Time, Do It Right, 1980. The S.O.S. Band formed in Atlanta in 1977 under the name Santa Monica, and their very first single as the S.O.S. Band, 1980's Take Your Time, Do It Right, went to #1 on the R&B chart and sold over 2 million copies. A few years later, producers Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis, then still members of Prince's band The Time, got their first outside production credit, working with the group, and the resulting Just Be Good to Me helped launch Jam and Lewis into the career that would go on to define Janet Jackson's biggest albums. Underneath the studio polish was a genuinely tight live band that helped bridge the gap between disco's collapse and the rise of modern R&B production. The S.O.S. band doesn't always get remembered as a launching pad for legends, but that's exactly what they were. Number 11. The Gap Band, You Dropped a Bomb on Me, 1982. The Gap Band started in 1967 as three brothers, Charlie, Ronnie, and Robert Wilson, singing in their father's Pentecostal church in Tulsa, originally naming themselves after Greenwood, Archer, and Pine, the streets bordering Tulsa's historic Black Wall Street district, before it was destroyed in the 1921 race massacre. A typo on a promotional flyer eventually shortened the name to simply The Gap Band. Baby, you dropped the bomb on me. After catching a break with fellow Tulsan Leon Russell, the group built toward a run of early 80s hits, Shake, Outstanding, and You Dropped a Bomb on Me, built on Charlie Wilson's raw vocal power. If you've heard modern hip-hop, you've heard the Gap Band's DNA. Outstanding alone has been sampled by well over 100 artists. Number 10. CHIC, Le Freak, 1978. Big fun to be had by everyone. Chic began in 1976 when guitarist Neil Rogers and bassist Bernard Edwards built a band around one philosophy: make the groove so precise it becomes its own instrument. Their breakthrough, 1978's Le Freak, reportedly grew out of a furious jam session after the pair were turned away from Studio 54 on New Year's Eve. The chant they improvised that night became one of the best-selling singles in Atlantic Records history. Rogers and Edwards' influence didn't stop at their own band's records. As producers, they went on to shape albums for Sister Sledge, Diana Ross, David Bowie, and Madonna, while Good Times became the rhythmic bedrock for the Sugar Hill Gang's Rapper's Delight, helping lay the foundation for hip-hop as a recorded genre. Number 9. The Commodores' Brick House, 1977. Before Lionel Richie became a solo superstar, he was 1/6 of a band formed at Tuskegee Institute in 1968, when two campus groups merged and William King picked their new name at random out of a dictionary. After catching a break opening for the Jackson 5 and landing a Motown deal in 1972, the Commodores built one of the most versatile catalogs in 70s R&B hard funk on Brick House, pure dance energy on Too Hot to Trot, and devastating ballads like Easy and 3 Times a Lady, often within the same album. That range came from a genuine two-lead singer dynamic. Drummer Walter Clyde Orange carried the harder funk cuts, while Richie carried the ballads, a balance that kept the Commodores massive for most of a decade before Richie's 1982 departure for a solo career. Number 8. Kool and the Gang, Celebration, 1980. Kool and the Gang started in Jersey City in 1964 as an instrumental jazz combo called the Jazziacs, led by brothers Robert Kool Bell and Ronald Bell. 5 years of local club gigs later, the renamed group's career went through some of the most stylistically restless reinventions on this list: jazz-funk instrumentals, harder funk hits like Jungle Boogie, and, after a mid-70s commercial slump, a bold 1979 pivot toward vocal-driven pop-funk with new singer James J.T. Taylor. That gamble produced Celebration, Ladies' Night, and Get Down on It, turning a band that started as jazz purists into one of the biggest pop-funk acts of the 80s. 60 years after those first Jersey City rehearsals, original members are still performing under the same name. Quick pause before we hit the top 8. If you're new here, this is what we do: real music history, real fact-checking, no recycled trivia. If that's your thing, the subscribe button costs nothing, and it genuinely helps a channel like this grow. Also, if you've got a band you think we slept on, drop it in the comments. Half of these countdowns get built off suggestions from people who actually lived through this music or grew up on it. All right, top 8. Let's keep going. Number 7, The Ohio Players, Fire, 1974. The Ohio Players trace back to 1959 in Dayton, Ohio, originally formed as the Ohio Untouchables, before renaming themselves in 1967. It took over a decade of grinding early singles, a first minor hit with Funky Worm in 1973, before the run of albums Skin Tight, Fire, and Honey turned them into one of the biggest funk acts in the country, with Fire hitting number 1 on both the pop and R&B charts in February 1975. Love Roller Coaster repeated that feat almost exactly a year later and picked up its own bit of infamous mythology. Along the way, a piercing scream in the mix spawned a rumor of real violence during recording, when it was actually just keyboardist Billy Beck cutting loose in the studio. Notorious album covers aside, 14 songs on the Billboard Hot 102 #1 pop singles is a resume that speaks for itself. Number 6, Rufus Ain't Nobody, 1983. Rufus formed in Chicago out of the wreckage of a pop group called The American Breed, cycling through names and lineups before a young session singer named Chaka Khan joined in 1972, personally recommended by the outgoing frontwoman. What followed was one of the most vocally powerful partnerships in R&B history. A band that could shift from funk to rock to smooth soul without blinking, paired with a voice that could do all three. Their 1974 single, Tell Me Something Good, written for them by Stevie Wonder, won a Grammy and announced Khan as a star, but it was the band's musicianship that gave her the room to become one. Rufus racked up 4 consecutive #1 R&B albums and 5 #1 R&B singles, across the decade a rare thing for a backing band to launch a singer this famous without disappearing into her shadow completely. Number 5, Earth, Wind and Fire, September 1978. Maurice White founded Earth, Wind and Fire in Chicago in 1969, bringing serious credentials with him, years as a session drummer for Chess Records and a stint in the Ramsey Lewis Trio, where he first picked up the kalimba, the African thumb piano that became the band's signature sound. What he built from there is arguably the most musically ambitious catalog on this list, folding jazz, African rhythms, and Latin percussion into music that was still fundamentally built for the dance floor. September, Boogie Wonderland, and Shining Star are the songs everyone knows, but the sheer instrumental chemistry, horns, percussion, White's tenor against Philip Bailey's falsetto is what separates Earth, Wind and Fire from almost every other act of the era. Few bands in any genre were pulling off arrangements this complex while still selling over 90 million records and filling stadiums. Number 4, Parliament-Funkadelic, One Nation Under a Groove, 1978. George Clinton didn't just lead a band, he built an entire mythology around one. It started as a doo-wop group called the Parliaments, formed by a teenage Clinton in a New Jersey barbershop, before a label dispute forced him to rebrand his backing musicians as Funkadelic.
Everybody right here, give me that back
When the dust settled, he revived the Parliament name too, running both acts simultaneously as two sides of the same sprawling vision Parliament, polished and horn-driven, funkadelic, wilder, and guitar-heavy. Between the two, the collective racked up over a dozen top 10 R&B hits, including Flashlight and One Nation Under a Groove, backed by live shows built around a literal spaceship descending onto the stage. Decades of hip-hop sampling turned Parliament-Funkadelic into one of the most influential forces in Black American music. Period. If you want to argue they're actually the most important band on this list, you won't get much of an argument from us. Number 3, SLY and the Family Stone, Everyday People, 1968. Sly Stone, born Sylvester Stewart, combined his own band with his brother Freddie's group in early 1967 to form Sly and the Family Stone. What made them genuinely radical wasn't just the music. Black and white musicians, men and women, played together as equals on stage, making them one of the first fully integrated bands in American popular music at a moment when that was almost unheard of. Musically, they fused funk, soul, rock, and psychedelia into something nobody had quite heard before, and hits like Everyday People and Dance to the Music made it sound effortless even as the arrangements were doing something genuinely new. Larry Graham's percussive, thumping bass alone reshaped how the instrument would be played in funk for decades afterward. Every funk band that came after, several of them elsewhere on this list, owes something to what Sly Stone's band proved was possible. Number 2, the Isley Brothers, It's Your Thing, 1969. It's your thing, do what you wanna do. The Isley Brothers have one of the strangest resumes in music history, a career stretching from gospel harmonizing in 1950s Cincinnati through doo-wop, Motown soul, hard 70s funk, and 80s quiet storm R&B, with the band reinventing itself at nearly every stop. They're the only act to score hits on the Billboard Hot 100 across 6 consecutive decades. And along the way, they gave an unknown guitarist named Jimmy James his first steady recording work in 1964. He'd go on to become famous as Jimi Hendrix. After breaking free from a restrictive label deal with the defiant, funk-driven It's Your Thing in 1969, the Isleys kept expanding. Younger brothers Ernie and Marvin joined in 1973, and decades later, Between the Sheets became one of the most sampled songs in hip-hop history. Few bands have stayed genuinely essential across that many musical generations, let alone kept getting rediscovered by entirely new ones. Number 1, The Impressions, People Get Ready, 1965. At the top of this list is a group that doesn't always get filed under band because their sound was built on vocal harmony. But underneath Curtis Mayfield's guitar and songwriting was a group that fundamentally reshaped what R&B could say. Formed in Chicago in 1958, the Impressions moved from doo-wop into a style of soul that carried the full weight of the civil rights movement inside songs that still sounded like hits. Keep On Pushing, People Get Ready, and We're a Winner became genuine anthems of the movement. Mayfield's sparse, melodic guitar work became a blueprint that soul guitarists spent years trying to imitate, and People Get Ready alone has been covered by everyone from Aretha Franklin to Bob Dylan to U2. Every band on this list that ever said something real underneath the groove is, in some way, following a path. The Impressions cut first, that's why they sit at number 1.